Hey there, Film Buds. Welcome back to the Film Buds podcast. I am your host, Paul.
And I'm Lauren.
And with February comes a new theme. Last month on Film Buds, we were doing all of the movies that we missed in 2021. Dear, what did you think of that overall experience with last month's theme?
I really enjoyed it. It was a nice catch up on what people have been talking about that I had no opinion of. And also I really just enjoyed within that us going, what if we chose the weird things?
Yeah, with the exception of like being the Ricardos, almost everything that we talked about last month isn't really like big awards show nominees, contenders, that kind of thing. But I also really enjoyed last month. I thought that it was super fun. I thought that we got to explore a lot of really interesting movies and really interesting and really interesting sort of perspectives within those. And I also enjoyed grouping them kind of thematically, episode by episode, inside of the umbrella of the movies from 2021.
No, yeah, honestly, like, I had a really fun time with it. I'm glad that we didn't watch anything that I really didn't want to watch. Going and making a list of movies and picking out the ones that we did really want to watch was a nice like turn of pace instead of being like, what if, hear me out, we watched Venom.
Let there be carnage.
Let there be boring. I didn't want to watch it.
But no, I think that it was really good. And part of the reason that we chose it, beyond just the fact that we kind of wanted to change up the model a little bit for the last few months of the year, where we focused on literally almost everything else but new releases, was also because we had this idea for this month's theme, which is all historic. So last month we were doing everything new that we could realistically fit in. And this month we've decided to do a total gear shift and let's go back like almost 100 years.
Honestly, is that not the Film Buds way?
It is under my management.
No, yeah, we watch so many old movies. Honestly, I really enjoy watching old movies with you. It's a way of exposing myself to things that I would have never otherwise been keen to watching,
Mm-hmm.
It's a great educational experience, but also like it's a fun kind of like go back in time and imagine being in the 20s or in the 30s, and this is new.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think that it's so easy, especially I think in the streaming era, to get caught up in a deluge of what is new.
Yeah.
Every week there's something new on a streaming service for you to watch. And that can almost become its own trap, because then you can start to forget to look backwards at what came before and where some of the foundational cinematic landmarks are.
And honestly, with everything being now on a streaming service, it's even lost that feeling of when we were growing up and you had to turn on the TV at a certain time to watch something specific that you wanted to watch. You had to really put in effort. Now you can just scroll.
Yeah, and also what has been lost in the streaming era is there are certain movies that are harder to find streaming, where once upon a time, somewhere on TV you could probably find certain movies, but that's also, again, just because so many movies come out now.
Yeah.
It's all about freshness and what's popular being put into syndication. It's a totally different ball game.
Yeah, or even just getting to go to your local Blockbuster and getting to like walk through the shelves and find something that you've never, would have never grabbed otherwise because you didn't know what it was. That's how I found Nosferatu.
Yeah, absolutely. And like independent video stores, if you still have one, give it patronage. Charlotte used to have VisArt,
VisArt.
which was like the place to go to rent really just any hard media in general. But also they had, Criterion releases. They had older films. They had international cinema. Like, it was one of the only places really in the Charlotte area that you could go and do that, and now it's completely gone.
Yeah, honestly, I think that we're gonna be bringing this kind of model back. I think that, everything happens in a loop. Eventually, we're gonna go back to the hard copy, mantra of media, because it's already happening in the music world with everybody buying up vinyls.
Well, and we're already seeing it a little bit with the genesis, the sort of rebirth of VHS.
Yes.
There's a lot of people out there releasing things on VHS again. So hopefully it comes back. Honestly, it's back enough that I've really thought about going out and getting a modern VHS player.
Oh my gosh, yeah, because we don't want my crappy TV that still plays VHS that's like maybe 12 inches at the maximum.
I saw this Twitter post, and it was like, I got this TV and all these VHSs for $30. And like, it was a great VHS collection. Like, it had like Titanic, it had, oh God, what else was, I'm trying to remember some of the titles, because I zoomed in on the picture
I remember you doing this!
to see. And I was like, oh yeah, this shit is good, like Heat, on VHS and that kind of thing. Fun fact, if I'm not mistaken, the last big US studio release on VHS before this rebirth was David Cronenberg's A History of Violence, with Viggo Mortensen and Ed Harris.
Is Cronenberg also The Fly? Is that the same person?
Mm-hmm. The Cronenbergs, Morty.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify for a second.
Yeah. So now that I've belabored the point a little bit with chitter chatter, and I apologize for you all if you're bored, this month's theme is historic Best Picture winners. We're in the middle of award season, right? All of the award nominees are out. The Oscars actually got delayed again. They normally happen in about February, but last year they got pushed to March. This year they've been pushed to March.
Any particular reason for them
COVID?
being... I guess. They still haven't been able to make Zoom cool for the Oscars.
And so, yeah, they've pushed the Oscar ceremony back, but we had this idea a few months ago, like December, we started sitting down and planning. November, December, we started sitting down and planning. And we were like, let's do a whole historic Best Picture winner month. And I thought that it would be also a great opportunity to get some guests. If you caught the newsletter, you already know everything that's coming out this month. So if you didn't catch the newsletter, we've got some guests coming up. One of them is one of my first film making teachers. I studied film just independently on my own for years, and then I had a teacher that I took a film class with in high school, Eric Whiteside. But my first teacher that ever taught me sitting down and making a film was at a summer session program at a College of Filmmaking. And so one of my first teachers that ever, and he was the one that mentored me when I made my first film of any kind, is going to be a guest this month. A friend that I made at that program is going to be a guest next week. And so we're going to go, and essentially what's going to happen is each episode this month, we're going to do 2 movies an episode, with 1 movie from each decade. And so this episode is the 20s and the 30s. If you're listening to it, you already know it. You saw the title and you clicked it.
Or you just blind clicked it. I mean,
let's press it, you know.
Hey, good on you. You've got more freedom than I could ever have in my
life. You are a free spirit.
That's right.
And so next week we're doing 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, then 80s, 90s. And so we aren't really getting into the modern era, but that's okay, because I imagine, honestly, that most of our listeners have probably been alive and relevant enough in this kind of field that they saw a lot of the Audi's nominees and the teens and so forth.
And honestly, if you didn't see them, you've heard of them at this point in your life. People can't stop
Return of the King,
talking
Crash.
About them.
Yeah. So... our first two films, I decided, let's begin. The 20s, we didn't have a lot of options because they started in 1929. So, they covered the years 1927 and 1928. So we didn't really have a lot of options with the 20s. So our first film is the very first... it was at the time called Outstanding Picture winner, Wings. And then our next film comes a full decade later, with the film You Can't Take It With You.
Honestly, I like Outstanding more than Best.
That's fair. And actually, it went from Outstanding Picture to Outstanding Production.
I think that's great. No, actually, because I feel like that's an entire encompassing of, everybody. It took a production to make this thing, and it was outstanding. We're just like, that film is nice nowadays,
Well, and to your point, best film, you can kind of just sit down and look at that idea, if we're getting into, I guess, the pure verbiage of it. You can sit down and you can get into this idea of, what did I enjoy watching the most?
Yeah.
What was flashy? What was splashy? What was cool? Whereas if you are looking at it from this terms of, it is a production, multiple people were involved in the producing of this, then your best productions, your outstanding production nominees, have to kind of be all-encompassing. Nothing can really be lacking. You can't be like, oh, it's the best film, even if the whatever wasn't really that good.
No, yeah, and I just think that outstanding, it just sings so much nicer than oh yeah, it was the best, because you go to any corner coffee place in New York and they've got the best coffee.
The best slice of pizza.
But outstanding, that's something that's really high praise. That's a good word.
No, for sure. And so we decided that we would go down this road, and so I also thought that it would be a good time, if you've been listening to Film Buds at all during my tenure, I love to take a few minutes to try and actively bore you until you turn off the show. And so
skip ahead.
Here comes a little bit of a history lesson on the Academy Awards. So the Academy Awards or the Oscars, as they are known, are put on by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. One of the founders of the Academy was Louis B. Mayer, who eventually went on to form the Conglomerate Studio. Back in 1929, he had his own company, the Louis B. Mayer Picture Corporation. But eventually he combined his company with a few others, and they formed MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. And so he was one of the founders of it, and for a little while the president of the Academy was the famed actor Douglas Fairbanks. And in the early days of the Academy, they actually ran films based on essentially 2 years' worth of production. So the very first Academy Awards in 1929 were based on films made in 27 and 28. It wasn't until 1933 that they decided to condense down to single years. And then originally there were only 12 categories. And there was only a Best Actor and a Best Actress. It wasn't until 36, if I'm not mistaken, that they added in the Supporting Actor and Supporting Actress category. Also of interesting note, they used to send out the nominees, or the winners, to newspapers. So that way they could print like an evening edition or a morning edition that had all of the winners.
I'm sure that it was probably a morning edition, so that way the very next day, if you didn't catch the show... Oh, I guess... How did they broadcast this? Not everybody had a television.
Well, I'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
So, the winners would be then printed in the newspaper. It wasn't until 1940 when the LA Times decided to print the winners early for the 39 Best Picture and all of that winners, that they then went to the sealed envelope format. The very first show, the very first Academy Awards, were not actually put on radio or anything like that. It was a private ceremony of about 200 some odd people. You had to pay to get a ticket. And it was at the Roosevelt Hotel in California, in LA. And the winners had been broadcast like weeks before.
And so they were just showing up to get their trophy?
Supposedly, the ceremony lasted between 5 and 10 minutes.
You had to pay to be there for 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It better have been cheap.
Well, there was a party, I think, afterwards. But the
of course there was a
ceremony
party.
itself was only about 5 to 10 minutes.
That's literally like going to a wedding where you're like, all right, the ceremony, let's just, we're done here.
I do. Good. So...
The Academy awarded.
It wasn't until the second Academy Awards that they transitioned to radio. The first Academy Awards televised were in 1953.
Okay.
And since 1969, they have been televised globally. And so that's a little bit of background on the Academy Awards. I don't want to drown y'all in information and some of the controversies that have come through the years. That comes later. But that's kind of an overview right now of the ceremony. And so the very first Academy Awards had the nominees for Outstanding Picture, Wings, The Racket, and Seventh Heaven. Unique and Artistic Picture was a separate category.
Unique and artistic.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the modern equivalent of whatever that means is the musical and comedy section, where they're just like, and whatever here.
That included a film called Sunrise, Chang, and The Crowd. Then there was Best Directing Comedy, which included Louis Millstone, Charlie Chaplin, Ted Wilde. Best Directing Drama, Frank Borzag, Herbert Brennan, and King Vidor. Best Actor, Emil Jannings, Richard Barthelmess, that's a name, and Charlie Chaplin. Janet Gaynor, Louise Dresser, and Gloria Swanson for Best Actress. Best Writing, Original Story, Underworld, The Circus, and The Last Command. Best Writing Adaptation, Seventh Heaven, Glorious Betsy, and The Jazz Singer. Best art direction, The Dove, Tempest, Seventh Heaven, and Sunrise. Best cinematography, Sunrise, The Devil Dancer, The Magic Flame, Sadie Thompson. Best engineering effects, Wings, and then for Roy Pomeroy, and then they just nominated in a general sense Ralph Hammerass and Nugent Slaughter just for their work over those 2 years, not for any specific film.
You know what? I like it.
And then best writing for the title cards was a separate category as well, because back in the first Academy Awards, it was nothing but silent films, with like the exception of The Jazz Singer, but even that has title cards. The Red Mill, The Private Life of Helen of Troy, and then George Marion Jr., again, just for his work during that 2-year period.
It literally says no specific film. Mm-hmm. Just in general, you're doing a great job.
But we're going to be talking about one specific film tonight, and that is Wings, by William A. Wellman. And, surprise, we have a clip.
We have a clip?
We have a clip.
Amazing.
So take a listen.
Paramount presents Wings, the first movie to win an Academy Award for Best Picture. The story of two men who have gone to war and the girl they left behind. Starring Clara Bow, the It Girl, Gary Cooper, Buddy Rogers, and Richard Arlen. Wings is a whopping air spectacle, dominated by remarkable aerial stunts.
So that was Wings from 1927. It was directed, as I said, by William Wellman. It was written by John Monk Saunders, Hope Loring, and Louis D. Leighton. And it stars Clara Bow, Charles Buddy Rogers, Richard Arlen, and honestly, that's kind of the... Oh, well, I will say this, just because she's an interesting character that I'll bring up later. Julia Swain Gordon. And the premise is two young men, one rich, one middle class, who are in love with the same woman, become fighter pilots in World War I. I have a little bit of a history lesson on this, so shall I kick us off?
Sure.
Okay. So, first of all, this film came out back at a time where World War I was not known as World War I. It was referred to as, do you know?
The Great War.
The Great War. There was no World War I until there was World War II. And this was at a time where aviation was kind of at a peak interest for people because Charles Lindbergh had just circumnavigated the globe.
Okay.
Charles Lindbergh, most people know for the disappearance of his child, which was an unsolved mystery, but he was famous back at the time for being an aviator. And there was a lot of very popular sentiment for World War I at the time, the Great War. A lot of people really felt like the U.S., had done a lot of good there. And so there were several films that glorified our involvement in the Great War. Interestingly enough, however, most people were a little bit bored with a lot of stunt work and spectacle that had been put on screen. Right? Because at this point they had been exposed to Chaplin, Keaton, so much incredible stuff put on film that it was getting, to some people's standards, a little bit harder to wow them. So our screenwriter, John Monk Saunders, was a soldier in the Great War, training to be a fighter pilot, but he never got to see any action. By the time that the armistice was signed, he was still stationed in Florida. And Saunders had, I think, random real quick note, just a fair warning, there's a lot of bleak stuff that comes ahead with some of the lives of some of these people.
I mean, they lived in the 20s.
So a little bit of a content warning regarding, like, suicide, assault, all kinds of stuff.
Delightful.
Oh, yeah. So, John Monk Saunders always apparently was very disappointed that he never went to war. He was really, really gung-ho to go and be a fighter pilot. And it was always kind of this chip on his shoulder, along with other things. He had a lot of drinking issues, etc. And he ended up writing this story that got converted into a script. And he wrote one of the early drafts of the script. And it was, about fighter pilots. The studio picked it up. They were working on it, and so they decided to pick this director who was known as, from his aviation days, Wild Bill, William Wellman. And William Wellman had been an active fighter pilot in the Great War. He was a part of the French Foreign Legion. He went over there with the U.S. military, he got picked up by the French Foreign Legion, and he was an American fighter pilot in the Great War. And he read the script and he knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to do some of the craziest shit that you had ever seen on screen with planes.
Well, he nailed it.
Yeah. And he wanted it to be big and bombastic, and he knew very precisely every little thing that he wanted. William Wellman is not anyone who would have passed muster by a lot of current standards. He apparently was very abrasive with women, oftentimes telling them, put on as little makeup as you can, and when they would be like, but you might see the lines on my face, he was like, I don't care. And he tells a story about one time when he was briefly an actor, where he and a woman ended up in a bunch of water and she couldn't swim. And so his decision was to knock her cold so that way he could get her out of the water.
Wow. Life was different 100 years ago.
Yeah, William Wellman was Wild Bill. He was known for having a bit of a hot temper, for being a bit of a drinker. And I watched some interview footage with him. He was an absolute madman.
That's putting it so mild.
The production on the film was quite the to-do. Certain people wanted certain cast members, and he completely rebuked that idea and instead chose our leads, Richard Arlen and Charles Buddy Rogers. Richard Arlen was also a former fighter pilot in the Great War. So 3 people involved with this film all had pilot training, pilot experience, and 2 of them legitimately were pilots during the Great War. Charles Buddy Rogers had none, but he still ended up logging 90 flight hours during the production of this film, because William Wellman was determined that this was going to be the best thing that you had ever seen on film with planes, and so they did early aerial photography. The first 2 weeks of all of it were essentially useless, and they scrapped all of that footage. It was a $2 million production, which at the time, or now translates to about 26 to 28 million when adjusted for inflation. They cast Clara Bow as the lead female, not the one that our 2 main actors are fighting over or at odds over, but as the one that is kind of this sad lost puppy dog lover chasing after one of our 2 leads. Clara Bow had a very troubled life, a very troubled childhood. Her mother was institutionalized after attempting to kill her. She was sexually assaulted by her father. But she ended up, when she got into Hollywood, becoming a precursor to Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, okay.
She was kind of this sex symbol, this titillating figure on screen. She was also apparently very particular. She had demands that the script be rewritten, which is why we have 2 additional writers on the script. And also, she was apparently very particular about her costuming. And her costuming led Paramount, who released the film, their lead costume designer didn't want to work with her. He didn't like her. And so he ended up just passing it off to this woman that worked in his department, who turned out to be Edith Head. And if that name doesn't mean anything to you, you should look her up. Edith Head is one of the most award-winning costume designers ever. She's, I think, got 32 nominations in her career, starting in the 40s, because they didn't have costume design as a category until the 40s. And she won 8 awards. So
Nice.
she's got a 25% clearance rate.
Those feel like the awards that happen during the commercial breaks.
Yeah, they're the ones that they really truncate. And the film overall, he wanted it to be spectacular, so he put cameras on planes. And he went and he got additional support from the military, partially through Saunders. And they supplied roughly $16 million free of charge for the production of soldiers, equipment, planes, all kinds of stuff. They even brought people in from other states.
Wow.
And so it was filmed in San Antonio, which at the time was slated to be the next LA. And they filmed at military bases there, and he strapped planes to it. And so Richard Arlen was really the one flying his plane all of the time. But our dear friend Buddy Rogers, who couldn't fly, had another guy that would take off for him. And then he would jiggle the stick to let him know that he was about to start recording and doing the take. And then that guy would just, duck down into his little pilot hole. And Buddy Rogers would do all of the flying. He puked, apparently, every time that they landed.
Noted.
Also about Clara Bow, the term It Girl comes from Clara Bow. A few years before this, she did a film called It. And it was a big breakout role for her, very
Oh my gosh,
splashy
it was literally...
role. She was the It Girl.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
And this film became a benchmark standard for all other war films, aviation films. It is one of the films that Tony Scott, the director of Top Gun, wanted to try and recreate the feeling of with Top Gun.
I don't think I've ever seen Top Gun.
Oh, okay, we can watch Top Gun. But that's kind of where I'll leave it. It also introduced Gary Cooper. And that's kind of where I'll leave it. Dear, what did you think of 1927's Wings?
Dude, man, I don't think I can top anything that you just said. You just went on for so long about
I'm so
all of
sorry.
this history and stuff, and I was like, I watched the movie, and it was delightfully entertaining. See, this is what you do when I'm at work all day being bored, is you do mountains of research. And I just sit here and go, yeah, my eyeballs absorbed it, and it was nice.
No, come on, you gotta have something. I know you. You have opinions.
No, yeah, but, I mean, okay. I liked it. It was good.
What did you think of this, I guess, comparatively to other silent films that you have seen?
Okay, so I guess compared to other silent films that I've seen, that we've watched, this movie was very, literal. As much as it could be for the times, because it is a silent film, there's a lot of, over-exaggerated acting and things
Play it
like
for the
that.
back row kind of thing.
Exactly, and there's a lot of, physical, not, humor, but, without lines, you have to tell people what you're doing with your body.
It has to be very performative.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with the guy who played, like, the Dutchman. He was very much, like, almost mime-like.
Yeah.
Where it was, or like a clown. Like, it was very much, like, physical instead of necessarily, like, any words coming. Because, like, you know, in silent films, you do see their mouths move, you just don't hear anything, and then you get the title card that pops up. And, like, especially, I think that a lot of silent films, at least the ones that I've watched in the past, have really leaned into this, like, otherworldly effect of, you know, the subject matter, you know, with the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or with Nosferatu, or, you know, I really watched a lot of, like, I guess what it would be called, like, silent horror movies. And this was the first time that I'd ever watched something that was, you know, this was it. It's a war movie, but it's not just a war movie. You know, it's a story about love and about friendship. And honestly, this movie really, really just, like, speeds on through for it to be almost 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
It really doesn't feel like it. And we talked about this before, but I definitely feel like the reason that the movie is so long is because it is a silent film, and we don't just get the expediency of people literally talking. We have to see the scene, and then they have to give us the lines.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed a lot of the, you don't need this person's lines, and I was like, this is hilarious, because there were so many times when, It Girl, name I don't know. Clara Bow's character, Mary
Preston.
would be actively, like, saying something, and you could see it, and
chattering away.
Yeah, she was just supposed to be, you know, this annoying girl next door kind of character that you don't really pay attention to, or, you know, our male lead isn't interested in, because she's just like that little sibling.
Yeah, she's like the spunky girl cousin that he doesn't have any interest in.
Yeah, and so there was just, like, especially in the beginning, you know, she would have, like, whole bits where I was like, yeah, and then we're gonna get a title card for her, and then it never happened, and then you don't get it, and I was like, this is a hilarious choice, especially, you know, for this movie, living in it being a silent film, the fact that it was like, no, you get to live very much in his perspective right now, which is like, he's not listening to what she's saying, so you as an audience member do not get to get what she's saying. And I just thought that was such an interesting choice, and I really enjoyed getting to watch this movie. Honestly, I had kind of forgotten the fact that, like, silent films do the whole, like, yellow is daylight, blue is nighttime, and,
yeah,
like,
the early color process of just, like, straight dyeing all of the film.
Because this movie was set in the day so much that once it finally, like, went to nighttime, it was almost, like, jarring. I was like, holy crap, it's night.
Yeah.
But no, I thought that this movie was really interesting, and I completely understand why it won Best Picture at the time, and now I have not seen what it went against of its day, but I really enjoyed all of the acting. I thought that they all did a phenomenal job. Honestly, this movie looked really good, that you could have told me that these were modern actors putting on a performance, and I'd been like, oh yeah, you know, let's go watch something else that they've been in, kind of thing. I think that this movie was really interesting, and is probably the only World War I movie I've really ever seen.
There aren't, because of the
nature of World War II.
There are not many movies that, in modern times, that are set in World War I. Like 1917 and Wonder Woman are probably the two most recent World War I movies.
And
Wonder Woman, for me, kind of cheats a little bit, and it feels very World War II.
Well, I was about to say, I was about to say that I completely forgot that Wonder Woman was a World War I movie. because of the fact that it's cribbing so much on like that World War II feeling of it being, you know, us against the Germans, and like this, and like, yes, that was World War One as well, but I think especially with the American education system, we really just say like the World War One happened, and then we skip to a whole year of studying World War Two, you know. So other than 1917, which I think is a phenomenal movie, very interesting, this movie is very much steeped in it being a World War One movie, and that's such a rare phenomenon. I mean, like, I understand that this is modern history for them. This is recent history.
Yeah, like a decade old at this point.
You know, that would be us talking about the Afghanistan war or something. You know, it's just
Desert Storm, something
happened,
like that. Yeah,
it happened yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I thought that I really enjoyed this movie. I thought that the themes were still very relevant to films that we've watched recently, to life today and life always, because like at the end of the day, you know, these are people, they have people emotions, and I think that if you're truly fluent in watching movies, you can find something that pulls you in to these people's lives that is, you know, that is a connecting point.
Well, I think classic things, timeless things, not even classic, I'll say timeless. Timeless things touch at universal human truths of emotion. And this movie is ultimately about brotherhood.
Yes.
And about the camaraderie of these two men. And about their sharing of the hardship, and them having tender moments, and them truly bonding even though they come from different backgrounds through this kind of insane crucible of being brothers in arms in the Great War, the first mechanized war, the first war that America has really fought in since the Civil War. And so it's I think, you know, really steeped in this journey of brotherhood and of sometimes petty jealousies, and on the Clara Bow part, this unrequited longing. And so I think that ultimately it's all really steeped in a lot of still relevant human emotions, to where even if some of the things are a little bit different, or even some of the time and presentation of things doesn't fit with what we normally see as now, the emotional core is true. And that's also why, spoiler alert, but the movie's like almost 100 years old, so whatever. That's also why at the end, when Richard Arlen's character David is dying, and Jack is holding him and weeping and crying and is so distraught, it lands even all of this time later, is because you've seen them bond, you've seen this story collide to this point, and it still is sad.
No, yeah.
Because it's honest.
And I think that once you kind of like brush away, once you get used to watching silent films, because I will say this, that silent films take like a learning curve, I would say, just because of the fact that they are so physical. You know, we don't walk or talk or act like this, and it's really exaggerated in order to get across.
It's kind of like if you've literally never seen a play before.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like a high school production. I mean if you've never seen like a professional theatrical performance before, it can sometimes almost be a little bit of like I've got to reset for my standard of what is naturalized.
No, yeah, because you also have to understand that like everything is so precise because of the medium. You know, because the fact that this is a silent film, it has to read a certain way. You know, the movie, regardless of you knowing how to read, needs to be understood.
Absolutely. And also, that's why they don't bog you down with title cards, is because if you were just constantly trying to read and keep up with lines, it'd be boring, it'd be choppy, nothing would really land. You just have to sit and watch and observe. And that's also why the music is so important.
Oh yeah, it's a complete like a mood inducing thing.
It's filling in everything that the fact that they can't speak, is pulling away. The music is putting it all back in.
Well, that's why, I equated it to being like mime work or like clown work, is because of the fact that that is also a silent medium that has to be portrayed through everything but. You have to be bigger than life in order for simple things to be translated correctly to your audience.
Absolutely.
And but once you get past, that little like learning curve, I think that this movie is truly very honest and very heartbreaking. When that kid dies with the cigarette, it was heartbreaking. And I think that this movie toes a very fine line between being a serious drama and also being like a truly lovely movie about brothers. You know, I think that it's doing a great job, and I totally understand why this was the benchmark movie for future war films.
I only have 2 notes, and one is a note, one is a comment.
Okay.
The note is, there are times where our characters, if they literally just said the right thing at the right time, so much dramatic tension would be solved. Like Mary looking at him and being like, "Don't you recognize me?" When Jack is totally blottoed at the cafe in Paris. Say who you are.
But I totally understand your point, but also like, I also understand her being so hurt by this person who has known her for so long. That he can't
recognize
her. He can't even look at her and see who she is. And, that would be like, me looking at you and being like, I've never seen this person before in my life. It doesn't matter if you tell me your name at that point,
For sure.
And also, her name is Mary. Do you know how many Marys were probably alive in the 20s?
No, you make valid points on that one. By the way, Buddy Rogers was actually loaded during that whole scene.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so my note for that scene actually is not necessarily...
The Bubbles thing?
Oh, it's the Bubbles thing. It went on for so
They
long.
let the Bubbles gag go way too long.
Oh gosh, they might as well have just made it a whole, like, just throw a tap number in this thing. Like, it was... it probably would have been more interesting. It's just, it went on for way too long. I could have had that thing nipped down so easily.
Speaking of the cafe, I do have another little bit of history for you.
Okay.
There are 2 things of relevance in the cafe scene. The first one is it depicts 2 women, one of whom is dressed like a man, openly on a date.
Oh, yeah, because when they do the pan through of the couples on the table, which I thought was a great visual, there is definitely the 2 women sitting at a table, one
very obviously romantically involved.
Yeah, one, and I thought that was it reminded me of something that I saw on Instagram, always on Instagram, that was lesbians of the time would dress very much like in male attire because it was seen as such a taboo, and they would like wear a monocle and stuff like that, because also monocles were very expensive, and it was seen as having like a wealth, but also, a lot of famous lesbians at the time were like, I'm a rock a monocle.
Interesting.
And that's what that scene really reminded me of. It was just like this really so quick. Like, if you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't have noticed. Really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. It's an but it's also, I guess, I don't know if it's very Parisian.
Oh, yeah. Also, yeah, I completely get that mindset as well. You know, when in Paris, it's like it's like a whole different world. You know, especially back then when they're so used to American culture, and that's why I love that scene too with him just like going buck wild with this woman. You know, oh the French spelling in the subtitles.
Yes, what they give her like
parts.
Hagrid fucking vernacular, you know, like we have to spell the accent.
Oh, it was horrible because you knew that like she wasn't French,
Yeah.
like at all.
Another fun thing about that the cafe, you mentioned the shot where it's this long oneer, and it's not very long, but it's this oneer that goes across like 3-4 tables and then lands on the fourth or fifth table, that is where our characters are. And it's our introduction into them in this cafe. How do you think they did it?
I'm thinking in modern terms. Oof.
Because they didn't have a Steadicam. The Steadicam didn't show up until the 70s.
And I guess I'm having a hard time envisioning what like a 20s camera would look like. Because I was
Almost like the Gatling gun that they had on the wheel wagon.
oof, okay. Because I was thinking rope. Like they had it on one end, had, you know, the pulley, like the whole thing roped off.
You're really close.
And then just kind of let it go, and it like would stop at a point because like that was like the lowest point or whatever, and it would just like naturally stop there. But like also, is this a hand crank number?
I think I'm not 100% certain, but I think that because at this point it was a big Hollywood production, it probably did have something that was like you crank it and then hit it, kind of like a watch mechanic, to where it was self-rotating. It probably didn't have to be truly hand-cranked at this point.
Then that's my guess, is it was on a rope and they just kind of let that thing go, and
You're pretty close. They built a hanging dolly track system, essentially.
oh, well, that's a fancier version of
And
what I
so
said.
they went and they put into the set these metal beams that connected down to a track. They put a little wheel cart on that, and then the cameraman was just like holding on to the camera, which was semi-affixed to the cart. And they just wheeled that whole son of a bitch through, and that's also why everyone, if you notice, leans
Yes!
back right at the end of their
That's why
interaction.
I was thinking that it's something that
they
isn't
are
really
making
controlled.
clearance for the camera.
No, yeah, and so like my other guess was going to be that it was all just like kind of like theater magic, where
Where
it's
it was zoomed in, and the moment that they clear visually a table, everyone just yanks everything
Yes!
out of the way.
Yes, I was literally like, people are like sitting at their table, and go.
No, you were very close. My other comment, not my note, but my comment, is that the real bad guy of this movie is Sylvia. So the woman
Oh my
that our
God.
two characters are fighting over is not Mary. It is this other woman, Sylvia. And Sylvia, for the entire duration of the movie, pretty much, is like dating David, but actively leading on Jack. You know, she lets Jack take this locket with a picture in it that was for David. She lets Jack continually write her letters where he's like, I love you, Sylvia. And she then writes David letters where she's like, Jack loves me, but I really love you. And so the active bad guy of this motion picture is not the German Empire.
It's not Germany. It's this
It
one
is
woman.
Sylvia.
Oh my gosh. All right, I guess to play devil's advocate.
Sure.
I think she just really felt bad for him and like really didn't want to, you know, tell him no and like have that be a whole thing. Like it was just easier for her to just be like, this guy likes me, whatever. Because that's why she ends up letting him take the locket, is because like
But she lets it go for too long, man.
well, yeah, but she ends up being the, you know, the loser in the end,
No,
because
for
like at the
sure.
end of the day, the man that she loves in reality is the one who dies at war.
And she loses at the end because she is the bad guy.
Oh my gosh! Honestly, she's barely a character in this thing. I
No,
think it's so
and that's
funny
the
how
other
much they
thing.
fight over her.
It is also kind of odd that they even include Sylvia when you could have just put some of this dramatic tension with the Mary character.
Well, I guess I don't know if it would have landed as well when he finally realizes his feelings for her.
True.
I think that having the other woman, having him have the locket and all of that stuff, and the one of the soldiers even is like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that she was your girl." When he starts bad mouthing Mary when she gets like kicked out of the army for possibly having sex with him, when in reality that's not the case. But no, I think that then that ending wouldn't have made it,
No, we would have had to restructure other things for that to work.
I think that this entire thing can be summed up in Naruto. We've got our Naruto character with Jack. We've got our Sasuke with David. We've got dear old Mary, who is Hinata. Mm-hmm. And we've got Sylvia, who is Sakura.
Yeah, Sakura.
And so, just like Naruto, the ending is actually Hinata getting her wish, which is getting to marry the dude that she loves.
No, you're right. But that's my only other comment on it.
No, honestly,
really.
I completely agree. I thought that her character was completely pointless.
Yeah.
Entirely. I really enjoyed, random aside, the fashion of this movie. It's very rare that you see like the early 20s. I mean, not the early 20s, but the early like 1900s really on film in an accurate sense. Like these are people.
Funnily enough, all the war stuff is completely anachronistic.
Interesting.
Because it's 20s war attire, not true Great War attire.
Okay, well, I was more talking about...
Like when they get to the cafe and some of their casual wear and things like that.
Yes, and the fact that Sylvia, because she is like it's, they're portraying the 1917 in the movie, even though it's the late 20s when they're actually making it. But, like, you see Mary dressed very, like... grungy almost of the time
Comparatively to Sylvia.
Compared to Sylvia, who's like this very like rich woman, and she's got like her rich lady curls and things. I really enjoyed the aesthetic of her feeling very like old money, like David's family felt, whereas like Mary and Jack felt very like, you gotta wear clothes kind of thing, and it doesn't really matter the look of them more so than the function. And it's just fun to see it in its time.
Absolutely. Dear, if you had to rate it out of 5, what would you give Wings?
I'm gonna give Wings a 4.
Okay. I'm gonna go 4.5.
Okay. That bubble scene lasted entirely too long. That scene could have been 2 minutes tops, and that thing goes on for like 15.
No, that's fair. I think it's pretty great. I agree that the bubble scene is a little bit of an issue. But no, I think for the most part it's really it's pretty spectacular, and
the plane stuff is absolutely bananas.
And here's my last little bit of trivia for you. So the recreation of the battle at the end involved 3,500 people in real life. Mm-hmm. 3,500 servicemen were shipped out and filmed that final battle sequence. During production, 2 military planes were actually destroyed. The stuntman Dick Grace, who was one of the stuntmen of the time, ended up injuring himself in a plane crash. And there was actually the death of an active duty military officer Cadet Charles Wisely, who died during production of the film in an accident, and he was given a full military funeral. And there was also an incident when they were doing the final battle scene. William Wellman had the whole thing mapped out, and they ran multiple rehearsals, and he knew the timing of this 5 minutes. It was exactly 5 minutes of the battle. And he didn't trust anyone else with it, and so he hit the plungers for all of the explosives. He had this 18-switch board in front of him. And while they were making the movie, the Moneymen ended up getting nervous about this because he was very ornery, and he eventually just stopped talking to the producers of the film and that kind of thing. And so they sent down Moneymen to figure out what was going on. And so he's up in this booth trying to do this, and this is when one of the fucking assholes decides to go, "What you doing over here?" and starts trying to talk to William Wellman as he is literally hitting the buttons to cause explosions to happen. Live explosions with 3,500 troops on the field. And because he gets distracted, he ends up hitting a wrong cue. And thankfully, no one was seriously injured, but the moment that he realized that he hit a wrong cue, he essentially, without turning to look at him, was like, "You better get out of here, or when I am done with this, I'm going to come over here and kick your ass." And after that night, he was convinced that he was about to lose the picture, and they came and visited him in his hotel room. He was sheets to the wind. And they were like, "Don't worry, you get to keep the picture. Whatever you need." And those are my last little bits of trivia for Wings.
Delightful.
Mm-hmm. It's an insane movie. You literally, even if you're not used to seeing a silent film, I think it is worth watching, if only because you literally cannot make a movie like this anymore.
Yeah, it's illegal.
As it probably should be, but if you want to go back and see some of the most incredible things that you can possibly ever witness humans doing live in multiple takes of on film, Wings is it. This is right up there with seeing all the crazy shit that Tom Cruise does, but times 11.
Well, yeah, because everybody's doing it, not just Tom Cruise.
Yeah. And that was the expectation. So, do you have any other final thoughts on Wings?
No.
Okay. Well, then we'll go ahead and jump into our next one. And I couldn't find a trailer, so you're actually just getting legitimately just a clip from the movie. And so, go ahead and give it a listen.
Look at your mother. She's still staring at me.
Well, who wouldn't stare at you?
Tony, promise you'll do it.
You know, every time I think how lucky I am, I feel like screaming.
Tony, please promise you'll invite them.
Oh, I feel a scream coming on right now.
You know we'll have to face it sooner
Oh,
or
yeah,
later.
it's starting right down my toes. Sort of a tingling sensation.
Now look, we can
Now
invite
it's
them
coming up
hopelessly
around
and
my
then
knees. My legs are traveling faster and
Tony.
faster and faster.
you're not really going
It's
to
in my
scream.
stomach right now. I'm afraid it's got me, Alice.
Not with your
Now
mother
it's going
here,
up
Tony.
and up and up and up. It's all over my body now. Here,
No.
it's right in my throat now. What I can do is fighting to get out. I can't hold it any longer. Here it goes.
So that was You Can't Take It With You from 1938. It's directed by Frank Capra. It is written by Robert Riskin, based on a play of the same name by George Kaufman and Moss Hart. It stars Jean Arthur, James Stewart, Lionel Barrymore, Edward Arnold, and the premise is the son of a snobbish Wall Street banker becomes engaged to a woman from a good-natured but decidedly eccentric family, not realizing that his father is trying to force her family from their home for a real estate development.
Wow, that was a completely different synopsis than the one that I read the other day.
Really?
Yeah, the one that I read the other day was an eccentric patriarch something, etc., but it was like it was focused on the old man, not
Interesting.
not the young dude. So I think that that's really fascinating.
So, the 20s were the Roaring 20s, the 30s were the Depression. And so a lot of plays that ended up being written by people like Kaufman and Hart or Clifford Odets were class narratives. They were very, very centered around class and class structure and the wealthy versus the destitute and that kind of thing. So the play came out in like 35, 36. The rights for this were bought in 37, and the movie came out in 38. And it was also the first of 3 collaborations between James Stewart and director Frank Capra. It's You Can't Take It With You, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and It's a Wonderful Life. It was, and I'll only do the movies that it was nominated against. It was nominated against The Adventures of Robin Hood, Alexander's Ragtime Band, Boys Town, The Citadel, Four Daughters, The Grand Illusion, Jezebel, Pygmalion, and Test Pilot. And Dear, would you like to start us off, or would you like me to start us off?
I mean, it doesn't matter to me, I guess.
Take it away.
Take it away. Okie dokie. I was surprised at how much I really enjoyed this movie. Like, in a genuine, like, actual laugh out loud moments, this movie is really funny. And completely off the wall bonkers. I think that it has, like, a very slow beginning, because of the fact that, like, we're very centered in, like, the Wall Street side of it. But once you get to Grandpa's house, it is ridiculous. And honestly, like, I loved this movie. I thought that this movie was hysterical and completely still very, very relatable in probably even more than Wings was. Like, in a true, like, these are still mindsets that people have today. There is still going to be the money man who has, the rich family who just care about their money and want to keep putting themselves into money. He has his bank or whatever his business is, his land deals that he's doing, and he's already made his probably, I don't know, I'd say 30s son vice president, and is soon going to give him the presidency when he steps down. And this is just how the family is. Whereas Grandpa, and Alice, Alice is his granddaughter, and they're in love, and it's truly like a Romeo and Juliet story at that point. You've got these two young lovers with these two different households, at arms against each other with two totally different mindsets. And you've got this, like, Grandpa, who's just a delightful old man who wants everybody to do everything that makes them happy, and don't you worry about money because money doesn't matter. And that ends up making the household just this smorgasbord of eccentric personalities. And it's just such a delightful movie, honestly. And you can tell that this thing was a play.
Yeah.
In every sense of the word. I loved the whole gag of them constantly putting the photo back on the pillar. I thought that was perfect.
People knocking it off, people putting it back up.
And it was always like a different person who would put it back up. It was just like some subconscious thing that they were like, yep, gotta put the picture back up. Like, it wasn't, nobody made like a big deal out of it, but it was always a part of the comedy of it, or Businessman Jones, the man who plays Anthony P. Kirby. Him constantly sitting in that, like, rocking chair.
That was one of my favorite bits.
And every time he would sit down, the chair would, like, hit him in the back, and he would just do this face at the camera that was so perfect of him, just, like, his disdain for this place, for this chair, for these people, was just summed up in this perfect moment of every time he would sit down, just being like, son of a bitch.
I'm uncomfortable.
You know, like, I hate this. I hate this so much. And I just thought that this movie was absolutely just so delightful. And I really thought going into this that it was not going to be funny. And I don't know why.
The description, to your point, does not necessarily lend itself immediately to the idea of it's a comedy.
Like, this is a comedy.
It's honestly almost one of the early examples of, like, a dramedy. Like,
Yes.
It really kind of dances that line of comedy and drama and how close the two interact and when they cross over.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, like, I just thought that this movie, because also, you know, movies of this time with this description are very, like, it's about a love story, and so
It could be a real snooze.
Yeah, you get just bogged down by people talking and unnecessary drama and, like, things that aren't relatable, whereas I really, like, honestly, once we got, like, 10 minutes into this movie, I was hooked. I was really like, where is this going?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are your thoughts of this movie? I've rambled on now for a while.
I'm totally with you. I think that one, it's incredibly very much a movie of the time, right? This hits directly into the zeitgeist of the period, which is people feeling poor and downtrodden, but also feeling like, what are these idiots? What are these rich idiots doing? You know, which is a very relatable idea, you know? Elon Musk, all of the time, I'm like, what is this rich idiot doing? And so I think that, like, it still is very timeless, again, like you said, because time has this way of repeating certain cycles, and so it's very interesting that 90 some odd years, 80 some odd years later, there is still so much relevance for so much of what this thing is talking about, because it's a generational home. It's grandpa and his daughter and her husband and his granddaughter, granddaughters, and one of his granddaughter's husbands. And, you know, it's this true generational home that also has these weird tag-along people. And it feels, very reminiscent of now, where you've got, families living together, or you've got a whole bunch of roommates crammed into a little place together. And so I think that you're right. I think that it's a very timeless piece. Also, the play that this is based on is a Pulitzer Prize winner.
Good.
Which is like the biggest prize that you can get in writing, essentially. I thought that James Stewart did a great job. You were right. He was literally 30 on the money.
Hey! Nice. That was a solid guess.
And James Stewart, Frank Capra, I saw a quote where essentially he's this ideal personification of an American, because he has all of this intellectual prowess and ability to speak clearly and that kind of thing, but he also has optimism and hope. Mm-hmm. And that makes him this very relatable, very warm person. And he's funny. He's so funny in this, you know? You see him in later movies that he does, like Rear Window and some of the thrillers that he did with Hitchcock, and he's definitely charming and likable in his own ways, but he's actively funny in this movie.
I think that everybody's just, like, very charismatic and, like, understands their part to a T. That, like, I not being able to imagine them in anything else.
Absolutely. And it's also an interesting way to go back and see some of the differences of a silent film and a talkie. Mm-hmm. Because now we don't have to have the title cards. The scenes have to kind of lead into themselves a little bit better, because we don't have the card to explain everything. Also, another thing that I really enjoyed was there were times where you could obviously tell wherever they had set up the microphone, because back at this point in time, not the actors weren't clipped.
No.
The set was mic'd. And it was usually in, like, a vase of flowers or something like that, where everyone would then gather around the table and sit and do their dialogue, and then they would move along. And so I think that this set had a lot of microphones hung, but there are a few moments where actors sound like they're all the way over here.
One moment especially for
In
me...
the kitchen.
Oh, well, there was that one, but there was also the one where the other businessman who had been cheated out of his monies came and
Ramsey.
was like talking at the business meeting, and I was like, but also because his back was like to us the entire time, that like a lot of his sound was going away from the camera.
His back was to us. The mic was probably somewhere in the middle of the table.
And so he's just,
And he's supposed to be playing like a weak.
So far away. I was like, whoa, what?
Yeah. And so it's again this interesting timepiece that is both timeless, but also is a great way to go back and re-examine filmmaking process and techniques and how film grew. And going 10 years, and I know that we're also dealing with different genres entirely, but just moving 10 years forward in time, it's a completely different ballpark of filmmaking. And yeah, so much of the early talkies were based in plays, because that was the easiest thing to do. Grab a play, convert it, cast it, shoot it.
And not to say anything bad about the acting in Wings, but I think because this movie is a talkie, everything just gets so much crisper, and really kind of sets the tone for a good bit of history of not only film but also theater. Is, because these people were probably from theater originally, that they've got, all of this dramatic prowess that you don't really get before,
Because you get so many wonderful wide shots where everyone just has to be on their shit.
Yes!
No one gets to take a break. Everyone's in character for this 2-minute wide.
Yes! And it's just so good, and then, I think that all of the emotional moments hit. I think that all of the comedic moments hit. I think this movie is absolutely hysterical. And I understand everybody's point of view. I think that all of the characters...
And everyone has one.
Yeah, I think that all of the characters are fully rounded. I don't think that Anthony P. Kirby is intending to be an evil, bad person. And I think that that's the problem with a lot of bad bad people in things. It's like, you're the villain, so be the villain. Yeah, curl your mustache. Indeed.
Maniacal laugh.
No, literally, where it's like, he truly... This is his life. This is how his life has always been. Why should I change it?
This is what he was told his life should be.
Exactly, and he fell in line with that, and his son should do the same for him, because that's what, this is the relationship. And so, I truly think that everybody has, like, just a genuine aura about them, even Kalishnikov, with whatever Russian accent that was supposed to be.
He was Russian, and he ended up living sometime in Turkey as well.
Oh, okay, because I was like, your accent is weird.
Mm-hmm. It's like Russian and then Turkish and then an American, learning English later.
Okay, then that makes way more sense. I was like, this guy is doing a horrible Russian accent.
Well, and I think that he was trying to ham it up a little bit as well.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure.
But he was known for being, like, Russians in things.
Okay. It took me a minute watching this movie to realize that he was supposed to be Russian, because when he started talking, I was like, who are you? But no, I thought that, I think that this movie is truly, truly very wonderful.
No, absolutely. Dear, if you had to rate it out of 5?
I'm going to give this movie a 5. I think that this is a new, like, classic for me, like a once-a-year watch kind of deal. Like,
really?
I really enjoyed this one a lot, honestly. We watch White Christmas like every year. Like, I feel like this is just up there with White Christmas, the same kind of like values.
High praise.
I like this movie a lot. I thought that it was a fun fucking ride. I actively cackled during this movie. You are my witness. I laughed.
No, like, I haven't laughed this hard at a movie, you know, since, like, we watched Barb and Star.
No, truly. And it was so much heart in this movie for it to have been, you know, almost 100 years ago.
Yeah. I'll give it a 5 as well.
Yeah!
That's pretty much all that we have for Wings and for You Can't Take It With You. As far as what we've been watching, let's see. Honestly, the only thing that we've watched from the stuff that we did for the last episode to now was the original Halloween from 1978. Well, and like we've been watching Jeopardy, but that's, you know...
Woo!
I miss Amy Schneider.
Amy,
but
I miss you.
We cracked out the 4K that I recently got. If you follow me on social, or follow the Film Buds on social media, I recently went and used a gift card that my in-laws gave me to go and buy the Halloween collection in 4K. Looks out fucking standing. And the new audio mix on it, incredible.
There are times when you like get to watch a movie in its basic, like its closest to theatrical release setting, and there's just nothing else like it. Honestly, it's like butter. It's so smooth. It was a fun watch, honestly, because, like, you know, growing up watching old movies, you always get some grain. You always get a little bit of like distortion or something goes wrong in translation.
The color grading on the home release is off, you know.
Yeah, you know, it going from being on film to eventually on probably VHS to then now on disc, you know, it starts to degrade over time.
And they sourced these from all of them. It's Halloween 1 through 5 in 4K. They sourced them all from original negatives of the film. The first 2 or 3 were overseen by the cinematographer of the original 3, Dean Cundy. And they're immaculate looking.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And again, the new mix on them, I heard like cracks of thunder in the car drive that I didn't hear before, you know, like it's a truly incredible experience. And I really enjoyed rewatching Halloween in 4K. Beyond that, while she's been at work and I've been doing research and job hunting and Film Buds things, I've just been watching the rest of them with their audio commentary tracks. I've now made it through Halloween's 1 through 3, listening to all 6 of the commentary tracks that provides.
Ooh.
And they've been really incredible. Halloween 2 is my least favorite of the first 3, and no offense to Rick Rosenthal or any of those people, but it's also probably my least favorite commentary tracks. I love the 2 on the first one. One is Carpenter and Curtis, and they're hilarious together. The other one is Tommy Wallace, Nick Castle, and Dean Cundy together. And then with the third one is Tom Atkins, who's hilarious, and then the other one is Tommy Lee Wallace, who is much more informative. And that's pretty much all that we've been watching. The only other things that I wanted to share news-wise, first is that famed cinematographer Roger Deakins, who is a longtime collaborator with the Coens, starting at Barton Fink, but he also did Intolerable Cruelty, Fargo, The Big Lebowski, also the cinematographer of 1917.
Such a good movie.
Was just knighted.
Oh!
Mm-hmm. And so he received his knighthood, and so he is now Sir Roger Deakins.
Oh, good, excellent.
and
the Queen did something today.
It was Charles that knighted him.
Oh, good. The Queen didn't do anything today. That sounds more like it. She doesn't even break in her own shoes.
And so that's one little bit of news. And then the only other thing that I wanted to share was, since we're talking about award season things and such, Oscar voting closed yesterday, but we don't have those nominees yet. But we do have the BAFTA nominees, and I won't share all of them. The BAFTAs are the British Film and Television Awards. And so the best film nominees are Belfast, Don't Look Up, Dune, Licorice Pizza, and The Power of the Dog. Outstanding British film, After Love, Ali and Ava, Belfast, Boiling Point, Cyrano. Everybody's talking about Jamie. Apparently not, because I've never heard of it.
But they are talking about Chris, am I right?
House of Gucci. Last Night in Soho. Woo! No Time to Die. And Passing. I won't do Debut. I won't do that one. The nominees for director include Aleem Khan, Ryusuke Hamaguchi, Audrey Diwan, Paul Thomas Anderson, Jane Campion, and Julia Ducournau.
It's Paul Thomas Anderson.
Not Resident Evil.
Okay.
That is Paul W.S. Anderson.
Okay, I was about to be like, if it is, this movie might be bad.
Paul Thomas Anderson is Boogie Nights.
Oh, okay. Better.
Original screenplay, Aaron Sorkin for Being the Ricardos, Kenneth Branagh, Belfast, Adam McKay, Don't Look Up, Zach Balin, King Richard, Paul Thomas Anderson, Licorice Pizza. So they dropped all of their nominees. You can go and look at them. The last thing that I will share, and I tweeted about it as well, is I decided to do a little poking around. A lot of people were talking about Spencer being snubbed. And everyone on Twitter was saying, well, it's because it didn't show the royal family in a good light, and the Best Picture nominees are decided by closed committee, and the president of BAFTA is Prince William.
Oh, that's super funny. I hope that they're right. I hope that he was like, I hate this because how dare you?
So I did a little bit more digging beyond that. And I learned that there are some interesting people affiliated with BAFTA. So BAFTA, the president, has always been royal, with one exception, Richard Attenborough.
Richard Attenborough. That's a good choice.
Good old director of Gandhi. And if you don't know him from that, then he was John Hammond in Jurassic Park.
Only John Hammond in Jurassic Park. Don't think about anything else.
And, well, I was trying to give them something that they'll know.
Oh, that's the only thing I know.
That's fair. But then, beneath the president, there are 3 VPs, one for film, one for television, and one for video games. So, No Time to Die, the new Bond film, is nominated, right? Mm-hmm. The VP of Films is legacy baby producer Barbara Broccoli, whose father, Cubby Broccoli, was the original producer of the Bond films. Our VP of TV is a man by the name of Greg Dyke, who was a journalist, quotes around that, broadcaster. He did some soccer broadcasting, but he is most known for being the man who brought tabloid TV to Britain.
Ugh.
And our third one, our guy who is the VP of Games, this is the one that's the real head-scratcher for me. First of all, he's American.
Well, we can't all be perfect.
Second of all, David Gardner is his name, and he has done nothing at all in the video game sector professionally. He is the co-founder of the finance and investment advice company Motley Fool.
They literally didn't have anybody to pick, and they were like, does anybody want the job? And he raised his hand, and no one else did, and they were like, you, sir, you get the job.
So I don't know when he was nominated to the position. You only serve as a VP for 6 years. But I found it very interesting and a little unsurprising why some of the nominees are potentially stale. I also found it a little bit interesting. I feel like there's almost a conflict of interest for you to be the active producer of a film that is trying to be nominated and be vice president. I feel like you almost have to recuse yourself at that point.
The only thing that I've been thinking about this entire time is I'm so glad that your last name isn't Broccoli.
Fair. You'd have kept Thompson, I think.
No, like, literally, I don't think that I could have been Lauren Broccoli. That sounds horrible. Like, I like to eat broccoli, but, you know, thank God her dad was famous, or else, like, why keep it?
No, that's fair. So that's I hope a little helpful insight into awards season. I'm going to talk more about the Oscars and awards season, some of the controversy around that, some of the history that has come from it as we continue on. But I think that this was a good little introductory episode. Dear, do you have any final thoughts for the listeners?
Oh gosh, let me pull something out of the rabbit's hat. Oof. That was rough. I don't know, man. I don't know. Watch something from a time period that you're not familiar with.
Yeah, go back. Pick, like, the oldest film that you think that you've seen and push forward.
Yeah. You never know what you're gonna find. I think that already, even though this is our first, episode of this theme, I've very much, after watching both of these movies, like, I told you this, I was like, wow, okay, I understand why these movies were picked. I understand why they won. And it was great to go back and watch something that, 100 years ago somebody was like, we can't get any better than this.
No, absolutely. And so many of the people that you respect now cinematically, or that you respect a few generations ago, this is the stuff that inspired them. This is the stuff that influenced them. And so I'm a big believer that if you want to be either a serious studier of film as an art form, or just an artist in any sense, whatever the art form is, you have to know where it comes from. You have to know the history of it. You have to have an appreciation for how far it has come, for the people that were considered masters of the time, for the pieces of art that are considered, master works. And even though the Best Picture category, an Oscar has its own controversies, going back and just picking movies that won Best Picture is a great way to go back and start to integrate some of that into your palette and learn more and be inspired by the things that inspired modern filmmakers.
And honestly, you might be surprised at how many things that you think are like a new trope in a movie might not be.
Are you thinking about the boxing fight in Wings?
Oh my gosh, they were knocking each other out. That was nuts.
They really fought.
No, I know! That's what I'm saying!
Wellman set that up.
Oh, wow, yeah, I'm sure that man wasn't crazy.
Yeah.
See, I think you really undersold how batshit that man was.
No,
but that's okay. History knows.
But that's pretty much everything that we have for y'all. I won't bore y'all any further. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you haven't already, go and sign up for the newsletter. You've missed February's, but you can be ready for March's. Go and follow us on social media. And if you would like, go and drop us a review. In March, next month, we're going to try and get Rotten Tomatoes certified, and one of those criterias are a certain number of reviews that keep us above 4 stars. So if you like it, even if you just like this episode and you want to essentially rate the show on this one alone, and you never listen to another one again, it would be very appreciated.
Yeah, we're working hard.
Yeah, especially, yeah. And it would really mean a lot to us. Thank you guys, as always, for listening. We're the Film Buds. Bye.